All right, so good morning. My name is Ramid Sana, and I'm here to present on rice soils in Ghana. So, rice is among one of the staple crops that plays a crucial role in the economy of Ghana. Between 2008 and 2020, paddy rice production was in a range of in excess of about 302,000 metric tons and then 987,000 metric tons. This resulted in a total rice consumption in 2020 amounting to about 1,450,000 metric tons, which is equivalent to the per capita consumption of about 45 kg per annum. Water regime and establishment of rice in Ghana. There exist four water regimes for rice production in Ghana. Now, these regimes kind of interlock with each other, and then the first one starting to be with the continuous flooding. This is the traditional method of water regime popularly used by most of the smallholder farmers in the country. Here, the water level is maintained between 1 to 10 centimeters above the soil surface to ensure that there is always water on the field to supply the water need of the crop. However, this method wastes a lot of water and can reduce yield significantly. The next we look at is the alternate wetting and drying. Now, this method involves a slight drying of the soil between irrigation schedules. Now, what do I mean by this? You realize that the field is irrigated and then allowed to dry for some period of time. So, for example, the field can be irrigated and then left for about a period of, let's say, 2 or 3 hours to ensure that the water has drained off for the soil to dry a bit, and then the next water is then pumped onto the field. Now, the importance of this method is that it saves water and increases yield. This is because you realize that when the field dries up, there is the photosynthetic activity then increases because there's no much water within the field to prevent or to retard photosynthesis. So the root is able to uptake water and then utilize the water that has been stored within the plant. The next one we are looking at is a system of rice intensification, which is the SRI. Now, this method involves maintaining the soil moisture at a field capacity. Now, this is a bit dicey, and then usually they use this method for upland rice. That is a rice that do not require much water for survival. Now, this method reduces water usage and then promote sustainable agricultural practices, because now water is one of the most scarce resource, and it is when you have this method, you make sure that you are able to save a lot of water. Now, the next and final regime we are talking about is the intermittent flooding. Now, this method involves flooding the field at a specific intervals, and the field is allowed to dry slightly between sessions. Now, this kind of falls within the flooding method. However, this system usually, for example, the field can be flooded for like 2 days. Then the field is allowed to dry for another 2 days. Then you now come in again to come and water or irrigate the entire field. Now, rice fields, you realize the soil types and the properties in Ghana. The various types of soil for rice production in Ghana are just, basically two. That's the hystric glysoil and then the calcic vertisoil. So you realize that the hystric glysoil, these soils are moderately suitable for rice cultivation. However, their limitations is that they are usually loamy soil, or they are silty, and that's in the top. The soils are usually silty. Now, the calcic, these soils are suitable for rice production due to their inherent fertility. So you realize that these soils usually have a lot of fertility within them. So most farmers prefer to use the calcic soil vertisoils for their rice production. Now, these soils have the following properties, which is the pH level. So you realize that most of the soils, the pH are within the acceptable range for crop production, and then the fertility level The overall fertility level of the soil in Ghana rice field is generally low, requiring fertilizer application to improve soil fertility. So you realize that even though the soils are a bit rich, however, they require some amount of fertilization in order to boost yield or improve upon the yield that a farmer is expected to get. The soil textures play a crucial role in rice cultivation, with heavy texture soil being more suitable for paddy rice production. So you realize that most of the fields in Ghana usually they are heavy clay soils or heavy texture soils. That is where they grow this rice. Then the drainage, so the poor drainage can be beneficial for paddy rice cultivation. Here we are talking about the lowland rice. So you realize that in areas where we cultivate a lot of lowland rice, the drainage is usually a challenge, and this also helps in increasing their yield. However, excessive waterlogging can be detrimental, of which I stated earlier on when I was talking about the flooding system of rice production. Now, despite all these good things that we've merit, the soils usually have their limitations, and these limitations are being classified into three. We have the physical limitations, the chemical limitations, and as well as the biological limitations. Now, the physical limitations include usually poor drainage, the soil textures. Some areas are not suitable for the rice production, and then there is soil structure, which is very, very crucial. You realize that some force to grow the rice in soil textures that are not suitable for rice production. For example, sandy soils, and then at the end of the day, end up increasing their cost of production when it comes to the water regimes, because they have to invest more into supplying water onto the field. Now, the chemical limitations, we are talking about nutrient deficiencies. As stated earlier on, the soils are not of best quality, so usually we have nutrient deficiencies. So it means that we have to supplement with fertilizers, and then as well. Then we also have the soil pH. Sometimes the soil pH, because of continuous production, it alters the soil pH, and also excessive application of fertilizers also alters the soil pH, which eventually affects the production cycle. Then the salinity level, also working towards that of the soil pH as well. Now, the biological limitations, we look at soil-borne diseases and then the weed competition. So starting with the weed competition, you realize that we have a lot of weeds that usually compete with this maize, and then it becomes very difficult. However, now the introduction of this synthetic weedicides something that it's not gaining much attention within the rice production areas, where they use these chemicals to reduce weed competition among the crops. Then soil-borne diseases, because those areas are usually swampy areas, realize that we have issues of our soil-borne diseases. Now, the management strategies we look at here is that usually we recommend soil testing. So we realize that before you go into rice production, we always recommend that you test the field to identify the challenges within the field, and you make amendments before you start with the production. Also, fertilizer application, we realize that we also look at the soil analysis to also know the type of nutrient that are lacking. Then we see how best we are going to amend it by supplying the required fertilizer. And then the irrigation management, so understanding your field and then also knowing the water source, how reliable your water source, we're able to recommend the type of irrigation system or water regime system that one must use in order to ensure or to obtain the maximum yield. Now, crop rotation is also one of the crucial method that we have always tried to preach to farmers, so that it can help break disease cycle within the field and also improve upon the soil fertility. So we encourage farmers not to involve in monocropping on their rice field usually. So the soil conservation, you realize that because these rice field productions are usually swampy areas with a lot of water, the issue of surface runoff is usually higher. So we coming in with technology innovations such as furrow creations to help reduce and then boundary formations in order to help conserve the soils within the field, to ensure that the potential of the soil is being obtained, that's realizing in terms of yield. So basically, these are the management strategies that farmers within the country employ to increase their rice production. Thank you.